Where are we? Let's just have a real quick summary of where we are and what's going on here in history, okay? We're in Romans 9. We're starting with verse 23. But where are we in history? The history of Israel and the Jewish people has been well documented in the Old Testament and other writings, so that's fairly well laid out. And then Christ, God himself, shows up on earth. And as a whole, the Jewish people, did they get it or did they miss it? As a whole, they missed it, right? Okay? They were looking for someone who was going to just relieve their pain in terms of what was going on between them and Rome. They were tired of the suppression, okay? But they missed it. And then there's some little pieces here that we need to grab a hold of and hang on to. Number one, God chose them. Has God chosen any other nation historically like he did with Israel? And I think the answer is no. And so we should hang on to that because that must mean something, right? Okay. When he chose them, he actually then called them out to do what? To be separate from others and to live differently. And that live differently came through the law, which was the Old Testament, right? This is how you should live. And when you do, everybody else is going to know that you're different than them, right? And we're not going to get into the details, but as Sunday school scholars, you all get that, right? Okay. Part of that, being different, means that they were set apart, right? And you guys know what I mean. Okay. So here's Paul in the New Testament. He's now the apostle to the Gentiles, which actually is a little bit of a quandary if you know Paul's background, because he was the guy who kept the law. He was diligent. He was raised in it. He had family history there, and he was zealous for it to the point that he was killing off these new believers in Jesus, right? Okay, so now here he is writing the book of Romans to the church in Rome, which is made up of Jews who are new Christians, right? The church hasn't been around very long, right? And so he's giving them training. He's giving them revelation that he received from Christ, okay? And some of this is hard for them. What's hard for them in this very situation? What's hard for them is that, well, let's think of it this way. This is a bad analogy, but it'll help us. Is anybody here an only child? Or was a firstborn child? Okay. All right. So, I'm not saying this is you guys. I was a firstborn too, and I would never do anything like this, okay? But as a firstborn child, you have a mom and you have a dad, and then you have you. Who else is there? Nobody else. Where does the attention fall? On the firstborn, right? And so that's pretty comfortable for a firstborn child. Why? Because there's no one else to divide the attention. Well, let's just say that after a couple of years, this baby shows up. And did they ask you if that was okay? No. And so sometimes there's some really funny interactions with firstborns and the next thing that shows up. And what do we think about that sometimes as kids? Sharing is not a good thing. No one asked me if this was good or if this was okay. And so I'm sure some of you have funny stories about maybe walking into a room and the oldest child has done something that maybe isn't nice to that baby. Does the baby have any defense mechanisms at that point? No. Does that matter to the firstborn? Not in the least. Okay, so just take that and put it into this scenario where the Jews were the only child. And then God says, hey, I got somebody else that I'm going to share some attention with. And what do the Jews think about that? They don't like it. And it's hard for them to understand because they are the chosen people. Who are these other people? And in fact, as we work through the Old Testament, half the time, God is telling them, hey, don't be like anybody else, right? Don't be like, and you fill in the blanks. The Canaanites, the Philistines, whatever. Don't be like them. And now all of a sudden, they're being taught, hey, God's going to share with them the privileges, salvation. What do they think? Now put yourself in the place of these Jewish people in Rome, in the church. Paul is writing to you, and what's going on around you. And we talked about this a few weeks ago. Who's persecuting you? Rome. Who were they? Gentiles. Paul is saying, hey, God's going to show up for the Gentiles too. And what's your thought? If you're in that spot, what are you thinking? I don't like that. And then you have, we'll just say it, the Old Testament Jews who forgot that Christ had showed up. And what do they think about the new believers? They hate them. So they're persecuting the church too. Why? Because they call it heresy. They don't want to share God, right? All right, so do we have a mess? We would call that a pot of stew with some bad stuff going on, right? They're getting it from all angles. And yet Paul is trying to get it through to them. Listen, God has a plan. Do you understand God's plan every day? And the answer is, Rick does not. Okay? But does that change God's plan if I don't understand it? No. Okay? All right, so let's just take some of that and walk forward, because I think it makes it more fun. All right? So let's have more fun. Here we go. I want to start not at chapter 9, verse 23, and I actually just want to read through the rest of the chapter so we get context, and then we'll back up, okay? So starting in 23. What if he did this to make the riches of his glory known to the objects of his mercy, whom he prepared in advance for glory, even us, whom he also called, not only from the Jews, but also from the Gentiles. As he says in Hosea, I will call them my people, who are not my people, and I will call her my loved one, who is not my loved one. And in the very place where it was said to them, you are not my people, there they will be called children of the living God. Isaiah cries out concerning Israel, though the number of the Israelites will be like the sand by the sea, only the remnant will be saved. For the Lord will carry out his sentence on earth with speed and finality. It is just as Isaiah said previously, unless the Lord Almighty had left us descendants, we would have become like Sodom, we would have been like Gomorrah. What then shall we say? That the Gentiles who did not pursue righteousness have obtained it? A righteousness that is by faith? But the people of Israel who pursued the laws, the way of righteousness, have not attained their goal. Why not? Because they pursued it not by faith, but as if it were by works. They stumbled over the stumbling stone. As it is written, see, I lay in Zion a stone that causes people to stumble, and a rock that makes them fall. And the one who believes in him will never be put to shame. Okay, there's a bunch of stuff in here. First thing I want you to notice is that Paul, where is he referencing? Old Testament scripture. Does Paul know the Old Testament? Very, very well. Okay? So let's back up. And we'll go back to verse 23 where we started. What if he did this to make the riches of his glory known to the objects of his mercy, whom he prepared in advance for glory? Okay, the point, we spent some time last week, I think, dealing with and mashing through the sovereignty of God and some free will. And there's a lot in there. Maybe we'll get back to that at some point, but I don't want us to lose kind of the focus here in terms of eschatology. And the point of this is that we talked about the character of God being merciful. Okay? All right. Thank goodness. So, Mercy and grace is seen here. And if we want an example of that, we would go back to Moses, and we talked about that in Exodus 33, that Moses asked to see the Lord. And God allowed that, but only to see his back. And so that was an example where God showed up and showed Moses his mercy and grace. Did that moment change Moses forever? Yes. In fact, when he came down, did he look different? He did. Okay? All right. So, again, to drill it home, God is merciful and compassionate, right? Okay, let's go to verse 24. Even us, whom he also called, not only from the Jews, but also from the Gentiles. So God called the Jews, and now he's telling them that God is calling the Gentiles, which is hard for them. Really hard for them, okay? And I think we forget that part. I want to drill that in. This new doctrine was hard for the Jews to understand. And if you think about the example, even for Peter, who at this point is an apostle, right? And think about the example when Peter is confronted by Paul himself, because Peter's having a hard time with who? The Gentiles, right? And without going way off of that, God has to show up and give him this revelation about how, hey, listen, it's okay. Otherwise, in himself, he was not getting this, right? All right. Again, back to the baby who doesn't want to share. That's where they were, all right? I would just say that as we wrestle through this, we need to come out of this thankful that God showed up for even us, okay? We can get lost in the weeds, and we can argue about this is predetermined and this was faith. God is merciful, and that's the part that I don't want us to let go of, okay? And just back to the Peter thing, let's go to just 2 Peter, and I think we maybe read this. 2 Peter 3, starting with verse 15, and this is Peter talking. Bear in mind that our Lord's patience means salvation. And reflect back to where we are, even in the New Testament and the Old Testament, that God's plan proved he was merciful. God's character is shown through wrath, but also through his mercy, right? Okay, we'll keep going. Our dear brother Paul also wrote you with the wisdom that God gave him. Who gave it to Paul? God did, okay? He writes the same way in all his letters, speaking in them of these matters. His letters contain some things that are hard to understand. Okay? There you go. Listen, people. Paul's writing stuff to you. It's from God. Don't lose that. It's not just Paul. It's from God, right? And is it easy for everybody to understand what Paul's saying? No. So now I don't feel bad if I don't get it the first time. Okay? All right. Let's go back to, let me just say this. Let's ask a question. Why is Paul linking the Gentiles and the Jews together? We're about to dig into the Old Testament. And you got to ask yourself, why? Why is Paul doing this? Okay? So ask yourself that, and then let's keep going. And just a spoiler alert as we go to Hosea, that when he goes to Hosea, he is going to differentiate between the northern tribes and the southern tribes. Okay? And this is where the fun starts. So, the northern tribes get dispatched, spread out. The Assyrian control shows up, and they toss them out, okay? And then there's this mix that happens because they're blasted out into these other countries. And what happens to them? In their Jewishness, what happens to them? Well, and again, there's so much going on here, okay? So we have the sovereignty of God, and when we have these people who won't listen, so God has somebody come in and removes most of them from the land throws them out into these other countries, and over time, what happens to their Jewishness? It goes away. Why? Because of marriage, and then kids, and those kids have kids, and they're starting to take up all these new cultures that they're in, and the reason they got kicked out in the beginning was because they were not doing what God asked them to do, including worshiping Baal mostly, but other gods, right? So here's the mess that's going on, okay?
Like now.
No, yep, not any different than now, yes. Okay? All right. But as this is all happening, there is a promise that God is going to bring them back. Okay? Does that make sense? You should be saying no. Logically, it makes no sense because they were thrown out. Let's go back to Romans and look at 25. And if you're reading this for the first time, it's going to be tough to grasp. I will call them my people who are not my people, and I will call her my loved one who is not my loved one. If you look at that and you say, okay, who did God love? Who did God choose? He chose the Jews, okay? But he's saying, hey, you were my loved one and now you're not. Where your head should be going here is when you first look at this, I start thinking about replacement theology. Okay? Is anybody's hair standing up on the back of their neck right now? Rick, where are you going with this? Well, at least I have your attention. Okay? If they were loved and now they're not, does that mean they were replaced? Depending on who you ask, that answer is different, right? Think about we're talking about eschatology. This is a big deal today. It has been a big deal through history, but do we still argue about that today? Yes. Okay? So when people have started to bring that and there's been discussions about that, I haven't necessarily had a place where I could come back and say, it feels like you're wrong, but here's why you're wrong. Bump, 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 bump. Okay? And I think that this verse gets used by people who believe in replacement theology. Saying, listen, is God's done with Israel. It says he doesn't love my people anymore, right? Seems pretty straightforward. Until you stop and go, well, who is Paul talking to? He's talking to the Jews, right? And why does he go to the Old Testament? Well, because they knew the Old Testament, exactly right. Is the Old Testament in the inspired scripture? Is it inspired word of God? Yes. Why is he taking them back there? Let's go there. Let's do this, okay? Paul takes him back to Hosea. So we need to get into Hosea. Let's just make sure that we understand historically what's going on in Hosea, okay? So, I should have got that to you earlier, but here's the section we're in, bringing in the Gentiles, okay, in this next little bit. All right, so historically, what's going on when he takes them back to Hosea? And if you look up here, in Hosea's time, he is primarily prophesying about the northern tribes, okay? There's been a division. There's been a split, okay? After Solomon dies, the kingdom is divided between the north and the south. The northern tribes are called what? If you look up there, what are they called? Israel. What is the bottom? Judah. There's a difference. Okay? When I read the New Testament and I hit this part, do I immediately think of Israel and Judah? No, I think of Israel as a whole, right? So if I'm thinking of them as a whole, and it says, my people are no longer my people, what's my conclusion? That God has changed his mind. That there is a change in covenant promise. Okay? What I'm showing you, what I'm going to get to, is that there is no change. There are 12 tribes, and they were divided. And now, sometimes in the Bible, they're called Israel. And sometimes the Jews are called Judah. And sometimes the Jews are called Jews. And sometimes in history, between then and Paul writing this, the Jews themselves call each other sometimes only Jews. And sometimes they call themselves Israelites. How are we supposed to make sense out of this? Do you understand the stress I've been under in the last 2 weeks trying to figure this out? All right. I'm not saying I got it all, but I will say that this was really good once the clouds started to separate in my brain, okay? This is the fun stuff. Okay, let's get our heads around the history a little bit more so we actually have some context here. The northern tribes. And hopefully you can see this, but the capital of the northern tribes is Samaria. Do you see that up there? Okay. And they also made a very important spot up in Dan. You see way at the very top, if you squint, you see Dan. Okay, clear up here. Dan is still there today. The pieces of it. Okay. Just north of Dan. This is the border of the country. Today is the border of the country. And just to the north of that would be Lebanon. Okay? Just for context. This is so cool because, listen, it's still here. All right? Now, you're like, super. It's a mud wall, and they put like a tent over the top of it to preserve it. Should I even care? This was such a fun place to visit. Abraham walked through this, coming down. When God called him out of Ur and he walked down, he walked through here. How long ago was that? Longer than last Tuesday. Thousands of years ago, right? It's still here. All right, I kind of got sidetracked in that. I wanted to show you, archaeologically, historically, biblically, it all lines up, okay? All right, so back in Hosea's day, this was an important place because when the tribes were split, they had a problem. They're following Yahweh, but they're not doing a very good job. Why? Because they're sharing with who? Baal. Okay, and other gods. Well, archaeologists have found. Let me just show you one more thing first. Okay. Whoops. Okay. Brenda, tell me if I'm wrong. I showed you the spot where the gate is. Okay. Just to the left of that is this archaeological dig. And this is part of the old city right next to the gate that would bring you into the country. Okay? And one of the things that was going on in the city was this right here. The golden calf.
What city?
This is Dan. Tell Dan. I don't want to tell you the wrong thing, but tell Dan, okay? Go tell Dan. All right. There's bad stuff going on here. And again, historically, there's a split, right, in the whole country. And so they have a new king. The south has a new king. They're doing their thing. Remember Hosea? What is the story of Hosea? What does the prophet Hosea have to do?
Marry a prostitute.
Let his wife.
Let's not have Sunday school. He has to marry a whore. How does that go?
That's right, yeah.
Was that a good idea? Does that sound like a great plan for a guy to get married to someone like that? Is that how to win friends and all that, and how to influence people and how to be successful? Is that part of a normal thinking plan for a guy? No. Okay? Again, relate to what Israel's doing. What did we just say Israel's doing? Proof is right there. They're worshiping a golden calf. How does God see that? God sees himself married to this country, to this nation, to these people. And what have they done to him? They have cheated him. They have cheated on him in this relationship, right? Okay, so I just want us to get all this packed into this story because it's meaningful. Okay, let's keep going. They have a problem with idolatry, right? Okay, so let's go to Hosea. All right. Hosea 2:13. I will punish her for the days she burned incense to the Baals, to the foreign gods. She decked herself with rings and jewelry and went after her lovers. But me she forgot, declares the Lord. Okay? So this is what God's feeling in this. Okay? And again, what we just said, Israel's worship of Baal is idolatry, but in this scenario, God tells it as adultery so that we can get a picture in our mind. Okay? How did this all shake down? Hosea is criticizing Israel because when they separated, they were looking for alliances historically. Okay? So they're looking for an alliance for protection and security. Did they look to Yahweh for that security and protection? They did not. Okay, so what did they do? They looked towards Assyria and Egypt for their protection. This is around 722 BC is when the Assyrians took over this area. Okay, just historically. They're looking to Assyria and Egypt for military support. Okay, and in the end, what happens? Did they get the support they asked for? No. God, go back to the clay that we talked about last week. God takes his hands off, and what happens? They, to their own demise, to their own self-will, to their own stupidity, they go down this path of idolatry. And Assyria is like, sweet, I'll take you over. And they do, right? Okay. Go back to Hosea again and look at chapter 1, verse 6, so that we can get the storyline of Hosea. Okay? So, do I need to read from verse 1, or are you guys good with the storyline? Is everybody good? Yep. So they know, we all know what's going on here? Okay? Verse 6, Gomer conceived again. Oh, I missed this. I got to go back to 4, okay? Actually, 3. Why didn't I just start at the beginning? Let's go to verse 2. When the Lord began to speak through Hosea, the Lord said to him, Go marry a promiscuous woman and have children with her, for like an adulterous wife, this land is guilty of unfaithfulness to the Lord. And so he married Gomer, daughter of Tiblam, and she conceived and bore him a son. Okay, so we have the first kid shows up, right? And then the Lord says to Hosea, Call him Jezreel, because I will soon punish the house of Jehu for the massacre at Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of Israel. Again, when you read that, is the kingdom of Israel all of Israel? As we think about it. As we wrongly think about it. No, it is not. It is just the northern 10 tribes. The south is separated, okay? I will break Israel's bow in the valley of Jezreel. I'm going to keep going here because there's some pieces that I want to throw in here and I want it to make sense. Gomer conceived again and gave birth to a daughter. And then the Lord said to Hosea, call her Lo Ruhamah, which means not loved. For I will no longer show love to Israel, that I should at all forgive them. Is he talking about the whole of Israel? No. Yet I will show love to Judah. There's your answer right there. Okay? The southern tribes. And I will what? Look at your Bible. What does it? I will what? Save them. Put your eschatology hat on. What's he going to do? Save them. Okay? Not by bow, sword, or battle, or by horses or horsemen, but I, the Lord their God, will save them. Are they going to be able to save themselves? No. Who's going to save them? Isn't that awesome? If you think future, we can think past, and God shows up and does it all throughout history. If he hadn't, would there be Israel today? The country of Israel as a nation, would they exist? There's no way. Okay? All right. And maybe I'm stepping on toes right now. I hope so. I want us to duke it out as we go through this to help us resolve some eschatology. Okay? All right. After she had weaned Lo Ruhamah, Gomer had another son. Then the Lord said, call him Lo Ammi, which means not my people. For you are not my people, and I am not your God. Is he talking about the whole of Israel? No. He's talking about the northern 10 tribes. Okay? If you don't think this is a big deal, Rick thought it was a big deal, so you're just going to have to suffer through with me, because I didn't pick up on this because I didn't know my history. Okay? All right. Couple things. When Hosea said this stuff, Assyria had not taken them over yet. But he's prophesying that it's going to happen. And then, does it come true? Yes. Think back to Daniel. When God prophesied to Daniel and he said, all these things are going to happen in the next, how many years? 500-600 years. And what happened? It happened. Okay? There's our rock to stand on. Okay? All right. Let's go to the southern kingdom for a minute. If we go to the southern kingdom, that's called Judah. Okay? And what's their capital? Jerusalem. Is Jerusalem still there today? Yes. Okay? And so as the countries, as the whole of Israel is separated, Judah becomes an identity, Israel becomes an identity. Israel had worshipped and did some worship Yahweh, but they were not exclusive. Same as a marriage that isn't exclusive and somebody gets cheated on, what are we trying to do? Bring things into that marriage. Is that ever a good idea? Never. Okay? Go back to Judah. Judah did a better job. The temple stayed. They worshipped Yahweh. Were they perfect? No. They were better. Okay? All right. And Judah is following the line of David. Now, why is that important? Why did the line of David have to stay together? We're at 700 BC. What happened in 700 years? Jesus showed up from the line of who? Judah. In David's line, right? All right. Look at verse 7. Hosea 1:7. Yet I will show love to Judah, and I will save them. Okay? Got to hang on to that. And it's suggesting at least a temporary favor on the land of Judah. Okay? All right. Rick, Is there any historical evidence that proves that what I just said is true? And the fun answer is absolutely. Okay? Couple things. Let's see here. Can anybody read that? I wish you could. But since somebody else did, I'm going to read a little bit of it to you, okay? This is a picture of the Annals of Sargon II. Why does it matter? It confirms that Samaria was conquered in 722 BC, aligning perfectly with Hosea's prophecy. Okay? This piece was actually uncovered in Iraq, in a place called Khorsabad, in Iraq, somewhere between 1842 and 1844. In terms of when it was written, when they actually punched that into the rock, in 1844, that's a while. Right? Isn't it cool? And that it's still around today? Okay? So, in response to Samaria's refusal, or Israel's, the northern kingdom's refusal to pay taxes and attempt to cede away from Assyrian rule, Sargon goes in and conquers Samaria, which we already said was the capital of that then country, right? Okay? He takes a whole pile of them as prisoners, and he disperses them out.
Who is he now?
Sargon.
Yeah.
He's the king of Assyria at the time. Okay? What is and again, historically, that's what Assyria would do. They would go in and capture a country, they would take a whole bunch of them out, and they would put them in other countries that they are already ruling over. Why? So that they can destroy the culture, right? Get rid of their history, change the people. Okay? And so this is wild. He takes a whole bunch of Jews out of here, takes them to other countries, and that's not good enough. He takes people from those countries and he fills up Samaria and the northern tribes' geographic area with who? These other people from other countries. If you're thinking critically, we would call those people Gentiles. Why? Because they're not Jews. Okay? So he literally is out to try to destroy the culture in that people group. Who do you think's behind some of that? Who knew it was going to happen? God. Remember when last week we were talking about God's wrath? Did God still have a plan? Yes. Do you see this unfolding with the sovereignty of God and the wrath of God? And what Satan wants out of it? Right? This gets a little more wild as you think through that. It's very interesting. Okay.
You know, it's absolutely awesome that they still have stuff like that is whole and not absolutely destroyed.
Yep. It's one of the most fun things, and I wish you would all somehow figure out a way to go to Israel. It is one of the most fun things about that trip, is that it doesn't make any sense in your brain when you're standing here at Dan and you're going, you mean this place is like 5,000 years old? It doesn't make any sense. Again, because here we think in hundreds. If my house is 100 years old, I'm special. I get to be put on the historical list of houses, and it says that Rick owns it.
I had a friend that was in the Navy and retired, and he was a curator in a museum and died quite a few years ago. And I absolutely kicked myself for not going down to that museum and seeing this stuff.
Yep.
That would have been so cool.
And here's thousands of years, okay? Okay, let's keep going. Let me just read some of this rock print to you, okay? At the beginning of my royal rule, and then it's blanked out, but the king that we talked about, the town of Samaritans I besieged, conquered. Some of this is jumbly, so just bear with me. For the God who let me achieve this my triumph. This dude's giving credit to who? I led away as prisoners 27,290 inhabitants. But I thought people back then were stupid. And equipped from among them soldiers to man 50 chariots for my royal corps. The town I rebuilt better than it was before, and settled therein people from countries which I had conquered. I placed an officer of mine as governor over them, and imposed upon them tribute, as is customary for Assyrian citizens. That's fantastic. Does that have anything to do with the Bible in terms of, well, the Bible isn't true, and, well, a Christian must have wrote that? Nope. Right? And there it is, printed in stone. Okay.
You have to brag.
I just think it's so awesome when this old stuff just declares the Bible to be true. Right? Is there any benefit to that king to show that this Bible that was written 5,000 years later is going to be true? No. He could care less. He could care less when he was alive. And yet, there he is. Right? Promoting the scriptures. Okay. All right. So, the Assyrian records describe the deporting of all these people and replacing them with foreigners, which confirms the prophecies of Hosea. Okay? All right. How about some archaeological evidence? We talked about that a little bit already, but excavation at sites like Megiddo, which you guys have heard probably, Hazar and Samaria show destruction layers dating to the 8th century, which puts it right there, consistent with the Assyrian conquest. Okay? Baal figurines and cultic objects found up in the north, supporting Hosea's critique of idolatrous practices. They dug it out of the dirt. Okay? All right. Biblical cross references. Let's go to 2 Kings 17. 2 Kings 17. I'm going to read this quickly, but it's 7 to 17, so it's a little bit, okay? All this took place because the Israelites had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them out of Egypt from under the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. They worshipped other gods and followed the practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before them, as well as the practices that the kings of Israel had introduced. The Israelites secretly did things against the Lord their God that were not right. From watchtowers to fortified city, they built themselves high places in all their towns. Just so we're clear, high places is places that they would set up to go worship. Okay? Were they supposed to do that? Where was the temple? Jerusalem. Did God say, hey, go put up a bunch of high places and worship me in all these places? No. Okay? That gets into the whole priestly order and all that stuff. So there's more to it, but just so we're clear. All right. They set up sacred stones and Asherah poles. Is that a good idea? No. On every high hill and under every spreading tree, at every high place they burned incense as the nations whom the Lord had driven out before them and had done. They did wicked things that aroused the Lord's anger. They worshipped idols, though the Lord had said, you shall not do this. The Lord warned Israel and Judah. See the difference? See the separation? See the clarity? Okay? Through all his prophets and seers. Turn from your evil ways, observe my commands and decrees in accordance with the entire law that I commanded your ancestors to obey, and that I delivered to you through my servants and the prophets. But they would not listen, and were as stiff-necked as their ancestors. In your head, I want you just to be thinking about the clay we talked about last week. Right? Is clay hard to work with? Yes. And where did we come from? Think of Adam, and he came out of the dirt. Are we hard to work with? Yes. Are we stiff-necked? If we're like clay, we're hard to work with, we're stiff-necked. Okay? All right. who did not trust in the Lord their God. They rejected his decrees and the covenant he had made with the ancestors and the statutes he had warned them to keep. They followed worthless idols and themselves became worthless. They imitated the nations around them, although the Lord had ordered them, do not do as they do. They forsook all the commands of the Lord their God and made for themselves 2 idols cast in the shape of calves. Okay, hold on. What did I show you? Here. What is the shape of that thing? A calf. Okay. And an Asherah pole. They bowed down to all the starry hosts, and they worshiped Baal. They sacrificed their sons and daughters in the fire. They practiced divination and sought omens and sold themselves to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, arousing his anger. So the Lord was very angry with Israel and removed them from his presence. Only the tribe of what was left? Isn't that great? Holy smokes.
Everybody I've listened to, it's a lot of good teachers. I have never heard of this.
Me either.
And it's fascinating.
And it was blowing my brain apart trying to piece this all together because my immediate thought is, how come I haven't heard this before? And when I came across some people who were bringing this up, my immediate reaction is, there's got to be a problem here. Somebody's throwing this out, and I don't want to be the guy that's repeating it if it's not right, but it makes sense. Okay.
Do you think there's significance in that? It says golden calf. Is there a meaning in that? What, do you ever, I wonder where that golden calf
I mean,
is coming out.
the ribeyes are more tender. I don't know what else to say about that. I don't think so. I mean, not that I don't know.
They worship that at Mount Sinai.
Yes.
The cow.
Yes. So I think that's what you're asking, right? What's the significance? Like, I mean, this is just Rick, right? Rick theology. You know, we're eating sheep day after day. I'd kind of like some beef. You know, other than that, I don't have anything significant to say. Okay? All right. Let's see. So here's the theological significance here, okay? Hosea's message reveals the faithfulness to God is more important than political or military strength. That's what we should have got out of that northern tribe decision-making process, okay? They were trusting in something else beside the God who had literally made them happen, pulled them apart, separated them, chose them, showed them favor, and yet what did they do? They were unfaithful. Okay, back to Hosea. All right. And so the difference between the northern tribes and the southern tribes and how God dealt with them, it's not this absolute, but Hosea sees Israel as having reached a point of no return. And when we think about that today, and I first read Romans, and I think that Israel has reached a point of no return, and so what am I going to do with that? In my head, I'm going to say, well, the church must have replaced them then. Does that make sense? Like, maybe I'm the only one that went there. Again, I got to back up and know my history, and I go, wait a minute, I'm wrong. This is wrong. And then I go back and I see this, and they're like, well, now I know why it's wrong. Because I assumed some things over here. And we should not have done that. Okay? All right. Again, I know that this is just like one tidbit, but if somebody wants to get into a replacement theology contest with you, just take them back and say, well, what about this part of Israel? Are they still around? Yes. Are the southern tribes still around? Yes. Is Israel still there? Yes. Is Jerusalem still there? Yes. Are those Jewish people still? Can we show lineage? Yes. Okay. What happened to the northern tribes? Well, they got diluted. There was some Gentilizing going on. Okay. But does that mean that they're gone forever? Okay, think genetically, think logically, think culturally. Are they all gone forever? Well, they can't be, because why? What's that?
144,000 are going to be made up of the...
But that's just a dispensationalist position. Does that mean it's right?
That's what God says.
What?
That's what God says.
Thank you. Are we here to argue with Scripture? No, we need to interpret it by itself, with itself, right? Okay, so how is God going to pull a people group who's been deluded back into Revelations? Into Revelation.
Maybe they all haven't been deluded. Does he say he kept so many for himself?
Well, okay, so just an overarching lesson of the history of the Israel, of the Jewish people, is that God always had a remnant. God today has a remnant. In the future, God will have a remnant. Okay? So, just for fun, the northern tribes, the people are tossed around. Okay? But here's where some arguments take place. Even today. All right? Even today, there are people called Beta Israel, which is Ethiopian Jews, often linked to the tribe of Dan. There are the B'nai Manash, which is Indian Northeast Indians, who claim descendants from the tribe of Manasseh. There are the Pashtuns, which is an Afghanistan, Pakistan area people. And some Pashtun tribes have oral traditions linking them back to the lost tribes. Who are the lost tribes? The 10 tribes of Israel. There we go. Okay? Igbo Jews from Nigeria today, in Nigeria. That some of those people believe that they are descended from Israelite tribes. The Lemba, which is southern Africa. Genetic studies have found that the priestly Y chromosome markers associated with the Jewish Conan lineage is in those people. Now, am I dogmatic about that? Am I dogmatic about it? Well, kind of, but can I really prove it today? Well, is that my job?
No, it's not.
What is my job?
Just
Sow seeds. Okay? Now, take that. Oh, my goodness. Watch this. I hope I get to this spot. Okay. So, today, modern Jewish history, the modern Jewish people that we think of as Jews, primarily the southern tribes, right? Okay? And they're much more easily traced. I want you to see that we have historical grounding and prophetic grounding here as we move forward. Okay? All right, I gotta at least sort of like leave out a cliffhanger here. Go back to Hosea, and when God tells Hosea to name his kids, there's some really fun stuff that happens here. Okay? All right. If I was the dad, none of this would be fun, by the way. But look at what he does here. Jezreel, the name Jezreel means to be scattered or to sow. What? What happened to the northern tribes? You can think through this analogy. They were sown. How? Like physically, they were scattered. They were tossed around, right? Now, I want you just to, and again, this is a little Rickish. This is a little Rick theology here, okay? But this is sort of what I was pondering this week. God takes the seed called these Jewish people, and what does he do? In his sovereignty, and even in his wrath, he sows them, right? For what purpose? To bring himself glory, right? Did Hosea have any idea like how big a deal this was going to be? Okay? I just thought that was fantastic. Today, the Jezreel Valley in Israel is a green, prosperous place where seeds are sown. And the agriculture breadbasket that comes out of that valley is nuts. It's bountiful. It's miraculous. It's crazy. And if you go to Revelation, it's also the valley of Jezreel would be the place that we would call Armageddon. Think about things being sown and buried in the dirt and bringing God glory and wrath and mercy and sovereignty. This was a wild couple of weeks. This was awesome. And it's still there today. All right. Lo Ruhamah, second kid. There's a couple ways to say that, but one of the ways to say that name is not pitied. Okay? Just hang on to that. And the last kid's name is Lo Amai, which means not my people. Okay? These are the children of Israel. And it turns out this is also the historical pattern of Israel since then. Watch the pattern here. Okay? Hosea's prophecy has immediate consequences. The Assyrian thing took place right after that. Okay? And the people were what? Go back to the three names. They were scattered or sown. They were not pitied by God anymore. And they were not my people, said God. Okay? Now, go to the time of Christ. Christ shows up. Israel is the harlot still in the relationship between them and God, right? They rejected Christ. What happens? 70 AD happens. What happens in 70 AD? Jerusalem is destroyed, but what happens to the people? They are scattered. They are sown. Where was God's pity? There wasn't any. And God's saying, you're not my people. That's what it felt like. God, where are you? How come you don't care about me? Look at what just happened. Hundreds of thousands of people are killed. A million. We talked about that. And 100,000 people are scattered. Right? Even today, with a geographical place called Israel, again on the map, the Israelite people of today, where are they? They have been scattered all over the world. And the people say, God doesn't pity us. He doesn't care about us. This God, I don't believe in God. Why? Because he's abandoned us. Is God saying they're not my people? It feels like it. We're leaving it right there for next week.